The Iowa Rental Agreement. In this video, we will tell you about the most noteworthy aspects of rental agreements in the state of Iowa. What is a rental agreement? A rental agreement, or a lease, is a document that outlines the arrangement between two parties regarding a property rental. The one who's paying rent is called a tenant, while the owner of the property, who lets the other party use it under certain conditions, is called a landlord. The parties may also be called a lessor and lessee. Typically, a rental agreement lasts for 6 or 12 months, with rent being paid every month or every week. There is one federal disclosure that works for all lease agreements in the United States. This is called the lead disclosure, and it requires the landlord to tell the tenant about all known lead paint hazards. They should also provide the state-approved version of the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. However, this requirement applies to not all types of residential dwellings. Required disclosures. Apart from the above-mentioned disclosure, the state of Iowa requires the landlord to disclose the names and business addresses of the people who own and are authorized to manage the rental unit. The landlord should also disclose to each tenant in writing before the commencement of the tenancy. If the property is listed in the CERCLA, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act directory. One more piece of information the landlord should provide the prospective tenant with is the utility rates, charges, and services unless utilities are paid by the tenant directly to the utility company. Security deposits. According to the Iowa Code, a maximum security deposit should not exceed 2 months' rent. The deposit should be returned to the tenant within 30 days after the termination of the tenancy. If there is any damage caused to the dwelling, the landlord can use the deposit to pay unpaid rent and to repair any property damages caused by the tenant. To do so, they should mail to the tenant a list specifying the nature of the damages within 30 days after the tenant vacated the dwelling. If the landlord fails to return the security deposit, they become liable for punitive damages up to twice the monthly rent plus actual damages. Landlord Access. According to the Iowa Code, the landlord should give the tenant at least 24-hour written notice before entering the rented dwelling, and do it only at reasonable times. The notice is not required only in case of an emergency or by court order. Termination of agreement. To terminate a month-to-month tenancy, at least 30-day written notice should be sent to the tenant. For tenancies longer than month-to-month, a written notice should be given to the tenant at least 30 days prior to the end of the first or subsequent term of the tenancy specified in the notice. Notice periods for non-payment and non-compliance. If the tenant fails to pay rent, the landlord should send them a written notice to either pay or the lease is terminated, giving the tenant no less than 3 days after receipt of the notice. If the tenant violates any other term of the lease, the landlord should give them no less than 7 days after receipt of the written notice to remedy the violation or vacate the premises.